My friends, let me ask you this. Have you ever trusted someone so deeply, only to have them betray you in the cruelest way? Imagine a millionaire husband shoving his pregnant wife at a glamorous party. But wait, her savior was her Navy SEAL brother. Stay with me, trust me, you don't want to miss this. Please, like, share, and subscribe. The music was loud, the lights shimmered across the sparkling surface of the infinity pool, and laughter echoed from every corner of the luxurious mansion. Guests dressed in designer outfits sipped champagne, snapping photos for social media, eager to prove they belonged at the party of the season. The night seemed perfect, at least for everyone else. At the far edge of the poolside terrace, a young woman stood quietly, her hand resting on the gentle curve of her swollen belly. Her name was Elena Carter, and she was 6 months pregnant. She wore a pale blue maternity dress, simple but graceful, nothing like the glittering gowns surrounding her. She should have been glowing with joy, preparing to welcome her first child. Instead, she stood in the middle of her husband's world, a world where she never truly belonged. Her husband, Marcus Carter, was a millionaire real estate mogul, tall, broad-shouldered, always in the spotlight. Tonight, he was dressed in an ivory tuxedo, his laughter booming as he entertained investors and flirted with women who weren't his wife. Elena watched from the sidelines, her heart aching with every fake smile he flashed. He hadn't touched her hand all evening. He hadn't even introduced her as his wife to half the guests. The humiliation had become unbearable. But Elena stayed. She stayed because she believed marriage was worth saving, because she believed Marcus might still care, and most of all, because of the tiny life inside her. But everything changed in an instant. Marcus's mistress, a striking brunette named Vanessa Steele, slithered toward Elena, her red satin dress clinging to every curve. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Well," Vanessa purred loud enough for nearby guests to hear, "don't you look out of place? That dress, is it from last season's bargain rack?" The group around her laughed. Elena's cheeks flushed, but she bit her tongue. She wanted to walk away, to keep the peace. But Vanessa wasn't finished. "You know, Marcus deserves a woman who fits into this world," she sneered, tilting her glass of champagne toward Elena's belly. "Not someone who waddles around like a charity case." The cruel remark drew gasps, a few stifled chuckles. Elena's eyes burned, but she whispered softly, "I am his wife." The words seemed to ignite Marcus. He strode over, his face twisted with irritation. "Enough." He snapped, not at Vanessa, but at Elena. "Why must you always embarrass me? Can't you just keep quiet for once?" Elena's lips trembled. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't fought back. She had simply reminded them who she was. Yet Marcus treated her like the problem. And then it happened. Marcus's hand shot out, gripping Elena's arm. With a sudden shove, he pushed her backward toward the pool. Her cry pierced the air as her body stumbled, balance faltering, her pregnant belly making it impossible to catch herself. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Time slowed. Elena's arms flailed, her eyes wide with terror as she tipped dangerously close to the edge. The glittering water awaited her. And then, strong arms caught her. A figure burst through the crowd, moving faster than anyone could process. He grabbed Elena before she hit the water, pulling her to safety with a precision that stunned everyone watching. The crowd erupted into whispers, phones flashing as cameras captured every second. Elena blinked through tears, struggling to breathe. She looked up at the man who had saved her and froze. It wasn't just a lifeguard. It was her older brother, Jack Lawson. 6 years older than Elena, Jack had once been her childhood protector before life and the Navy had taken him away. He was tall, muscular, his short hair damp with sweat, his sharp eyes scanning Marcus with a deadly calm. Jack wasn't just a brother. He was a former Navy SEAL, trained for life-or-death situations. Tonight, he wasn't just a guest. He was the one person Marcus never expected, and the last person he should have crossed. The crowd buzzed with tension. Some whispered in shock, others recorded eagerly, sensing the scandal unfolding before their eyes. Marcus's smirk faltered as Jack gently set Elena on her feet, shielding her with his body. "You shoved a pregnant woman." Jack's voice was low, dangerous, steady as steel. "You shoved my sister." Marcus scoffed, trying to laugh it off. It was nothing. She tripped. Everyone saw it. But nobody believed him. Cameras had captured everything. The image of Marcus Carter, the millionaire golden boy, pushing his own wife toward the pool while his mistress watched with delight, was already spreading across social media. Elena clung to Jack's arm, her tears mixing with relief and humiliation. The man she trusted most had tried to destroy her, and the brother she hadn't seen in years had been the one to save her. Around them, the glamorous party had shifted into chaos. Investors whispered, reporters typed furiously on their phones, and Vanessa's mocking smile had vanished, replaced with nervous silence. And then, Jack stepped closer to Marcus. His voice dropped to a tone only a Navy SEAL could muster, one that made the millionaire's bravado crumble. "You ever touch her again?" Jack said, his eyes locking on Marcus's, "and you'll regret it." The music still played in the background, but the night had changed forever. Elena wasn't just the silent wife anymore. She was the center of a scandal that would soon shake Marcus's empire to the core. And with her brother by her side, she wasn't as powerless as everyone thought. Because this was only the beginning. Elena Carter had never been the kind of woman who craved the spotlight. She grew up in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher, living in a modest two-bedroom house that always smelled faintly of motor oil and fresh-baked bread. Life was simple, sometimes hard, but filled with warmth. She was the kind of girl who found joy in sketching by the window, who saved her allowance for second-hand novels, who dreamed of love as something steady and kind, not flashy or cruel. From the time she was little, Elena believed family was everything. She believed in loyalty, sacrifice, and promises kept. Those values were etched into her heart the night her older brother Jack enlisted in the Navy. She was only 14 then, clinging to him as though letting go would break her world apart. Jack promised her he'd always protect her, no matter how far away he was. And for years, his letters came, short, scribbled notes from far-off bases, words that reminded her she wasn't alone. But life moved on. She studied graphic design at a community college, worked part-time at a coffee shop, and slowly built a small life for herself. She never had much, but she was content. That was when she met Marcus Carter. He walked into the coffee shop one afternoon like he owned the world. Polished shoes, expensive watch, the kind of swagger that made everyone notice. He ordered an Americano, then stayed for hours, claiming he needed a quiet place to work. But Elena noticed the way his eyes kept drifting toward her, how his compliments slipped into their small talk. Marcus was magnetic. He told her she was beautiful when she was still wearing her apron with coffee stains on it. He said she had a quiet elegance, something rare and priceless. For a girl who had spent her whole life in the shadows, his attention felt like sunlight. Against her better judgment, she fell for him. Their whirlwind romance moved fast. Marcus showered her with gifts she'd never imagined, designer handbags, weekend trips, candlelit dinners at places she didn't even know existed. He made promises, whispered that she would never have to struggle again. When he proposed, Elena believed she was stepping into her own fairy tale. At first, marriage seemed like a dream. They lived in a sprawling mansion with glass walls overlooking the city. Elena traded her old car for a sleek SUV Marcus insisted she deserved. She thought she had found safety, security, and love all wrapped into one. But it didn't take long for cracks to show. Marcus was charming in public, but behind closed doors, he grew colder. His career consumed him, and his ambition left little room for tenderness. He began to mock Elena for her simplicity, her inexpensive clothes, her lack of connections, her quiet voice at high society events. She tried harder, wore the dresses he bought her, smiled through the gossip, and silenced her own discomfort. When she became pregnant, Elena hoped everything would change. She thought the child would soften Marcus, bring them closer, remind him of the love that had once existed. For a brief moment, it seemed true. Marcus bought baby clothes, took her hand at doctor's appointments, and spoke about the future. But soon, his excitement faded. He began staying out late, attending parties without her, showing up in photos with Vanessa Steele, the woman everyone whispered about. Elena tried to ignore the rumors, clinging to the belief that love could be salvaged. She stayed quiet, hoping silence would keep her marriage intact. Yet inside, she was unraveling. Pregnancy was hard enough, the morning sickness, the swollen ankles, the endless fatigue. But carrying those struggles alone while your husband flirted with another woman was unbearable. Elena often cried in the nursery at night, sitting in the rocking chair meant for her baby, whispering promises to the child inside her. "You will never feel unloved," she vowed softly. "Not the way I do." Still, she tried to present the image of a dutiful wife. She told herself she was staying for the baby, that Marcus would one day see her worth again. But the truth was harsher. She had become invisible to the man who once claimed she was everything. The poolside party was only the latest humiliation in a string of many. And though Elena had spent years shrinking herself to fit into Marcus's world, she didn't realize that night would be the breaking point, the moment her life would split into before and after. Because when Marcus shoved her, when his hand turned cruel in front of everyone, the illusion shattered. It wasn't just about being unloved anymore. It was about survival. For her, for her baby, for the dignity she had nearly lost. And when her brother Jack appeared, when his arms pulled her back from the water's edge, it was as though fate itself had stepped in. For years, she thought she had no one. But Jack's sudden return reminded her of something she had forgotten. She wasn't powerless. She had family. She had strength buried deep inside. The girl who once lived quietly in her parents' house, who thought love was about sacrifice and silence, was gone. In her place stood a woman who had seen the mask ripped from her husband's face. And for the first time, Elena began to wonder if she could rise again, not just as Marcus's discarded wife, but as a mother, a sister, and a woman with her own fire. Because in that moment, one truth became painfully clear. Marcus Carter had created his own worst enemy, the woman he thought he could break. The Carter mansion had been built to impress, and tonight it lived up to its purpose. From the gated driveway where valets ushered in Lamborghinis and Rolls-Royces, to the sprawling terrace that wrapped around the turquoise infinity pool, every inch of the estate screamed wealth. Chandeliers imported from Italy glimmered over the outdoor bar. White roses floated in glass bowls across tables draped in silk. A DJ spun tracks beside the pool, while servers in crisp uniforms carried trays of champagne that never seemed to run out. It was the kind of night designed for headlines, and Marcus Carter wanted nothing less. Boasting the most exclusive poolside party of the summer was his way of cementing his image as a man of power, influence, and endless charm. Investors, celebrities, models, and politicians brushed shoulders beneath the palm trees, every smile carefully staged for cameras. But for Elena, the glamour was suffocating. She stood near the pool's edge, feeling as though the music was miles away. The guests shimmered with sequined gowns and sharp tuxedos, their laughter rising like smoke into the warm night air. Elena wore the soft blue dress she had chosen herself, one she thought was elegant but modest. Compared to the glittering women around her, she felt like a shadow in her own home. Her hand rested protectively over her belly as she scanned the crowd for Marcus. He was never hard to find, always in the center, surrounded by admirers. And there he was now, across the terrace, leaning close to Vanessa Steele. Elena's stomach tightened as she watched Vanessa lay a manicured hand on Marcus's arm, laughing a little too loudly, leaning a little too close. Elena swallowed her pride, telling herself she wouldn't cause a scene. She had promised herself countless times that she would keep the peace, that she wouldn't let her emotions embarrass him in public. But humiliation had a way of creeping in, no matter how hard she tried to ignore it. She overheard snippets of conversation as guests passed by. Marcus really knows how to throw a party. Who's the woman in the blue dress? Oh, that's his wife? Doesn't look like she belongs here. She looks so plain. Vanessa's the one who matches his world. Each comment sliced through Elena like glass. She forced herself to breathe, to stand tall, to keep her eyes on the glowing pool, rather than the whispers curling behind her back. The music swelled, and the night deepened, the scent of champagne mixed with chlorine and jasmine. Waiters passed by with trays of lobster canapés, but Elena couldn't bring herself to eat. Her nerves twisted too tightly. She felt both exposed and invisible, seen enough to be mocked, ignored enough to be forgotten. She remembered when she and Marcus first moved into this house. He had promised her the pool parties would be theirs, nights filled with love and laughter. She had imagined evenings where she could rest her head on his shoulder while they watched the city lights shimmer in the distance. Instead, the pool had become his stage, and she his unwanted prop. As Marcus raised a glass to toast a group of investors, Vanessa slid beside him, her red dress glowing under the lights like a flame. Elena watched him drape an arm over Vanessa's chair, the gesture casual but intimate. For the world, it was entertainment. For Elena, it was betrayal. Again and again, in front of everyone. Her baby kicked softly, reminding her that she wasn't alone. She whispered under her breath, "I'm still here. I'm still your mother." She moved away from the crowd, closer to the water, seeking a sliver of calm. The pool sparkled with thousands of lights embedded along the edges, the reflection of the stars dancing across the surface. Somewhere inside the house, music shifted into a slower rhythm. Couples swayed together while photographers snapped pictures. But Elena stood apart, more a spectator than a wife. As the night dragged on, Marcus finally noticed her, or rather noticed her absence from his orbit. He strode across the terrace with Vanessa lingering close behind him. His smile was tight, his voice sharp. "What are you doing over here?" he demanded, though his words were softened with a fake charm for the guests within earshot. "I needed some air," Elena answered quietly, her fingers tightening over her belly. Marcus sighed dramatically. "You're supposed to mingle, Elena. People notice when you hide away like this. Do you know how it makes me look?" Elena's heart sank. It wasn't about her feelings. It was about his image. Always his image. Before she could respond, Vanessa's voice cut in, dripping with venom. "She's not hiding, Marcus. She's just uncomfortable. This isn't really her scene, is it?" A ripple of laughter rose from those nearby, as though Vanessa's cruelty was entertainment. Elena felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but the words lodged in her throat. Marcus leaned in, his whisper a dagger. "Just smile and behave, Elena. That's all I ask. Don't ruin this for me." Her eyes stung. Behave, as though she were a child, as though her silence was her only worth. The night's beauty blurred into something bitter. The shimmering pool, the glittering gowns, the expensive champagne, all of it felt hollow, a cage she couldn't escape. The laughter around her no longer sounded like music, but like jeers, echoes of a world where she would never belong. And deep down, Elena realized something she had been denying for months. This wasn't just about Vanessa or Marcus's betrayal. It was about the life she had given up, the woman she had buried inside herself just to stand by his side. The pool sparkled, reflecting the fractured pieces of a life that looked perfect on the outside, but was cracking at its core. The party roared on, oblivious. Cameras flashed, toasts were made, and Marcus basked in the glow of admiration. But Elena's chest tightened with a silent scream. Something was coming, something she couldn't stop. Because sometimes it only takes one cruel moment in a glittering night for the mask to fall away. And that moment was closer than anyone imagined. Marcus Carter was the kind of man people either envied or feared. To the outside world, he was the self-made millionaire, the charming host, the man who could close billion-dollar real estate deals with a smile. His face appeared in magazines, his name trended on financial blogs, and his charisma lit up every gala he attended. But behind the flash of cameras and the curated image was a man who believed love was a transaction, loyalty a weakness, and people, especially women, were tools to be used and discarded. Elena had once thought his confidence was strength. Now she saw it for what it truly was, arrogance laced with cruelty. The party was Marcus's playground. He thrived on the admiration, the whispered envy, the constant validation. When he walked through the crowd, people parted as though he were royalty. He lived for that power, and nothing and no one was allowed to dull his shine. Not even his pregnant wife. Vanessa Steele knew this about him, and she knew how to use it. She was everything Elena wasn't. Bold, glamorous, and unafraid to demand attention. Her long red dress shimmered like fire under the lights, her laughter echoing across the terrace. To Marcus, Vanessa was exciting, a symbol of the youth and luxury he craved. To Vanessa, Marcus was a ticket to the world she'd always wanted, a world of wealth, power, and notoriety. Together, they made a cruel pair. "Marcus," Vanessa whispered as they leaned against the marble bar, her eyes flicking toward Elena, standing near the pool. She looks so lost. Honestly, it's embarrassing. People are starting to notice. Marcus followed her gaze. His jaw tightened. "She's supposed to be mingling. She knows better." Vanessa smirked. "Maybe she does, maybe she doesn't, But if you want to keep climbing, Marcus, you can't let her drag you down. Investors don't want to see weakness. They don't want a wife who looks ordinary. The venom in her voice dripped like poison. But Marcus didn't defend Elena. He didn't remind Vanessa that Elena was his wife, the mother of his child. Instead, he nodded as if Vanessa's words were gospel. "She'll learn," he said coldly. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them, with the detached tone of a man talking about an employee who wasn't performing well. To Marcus, Elena was no longer a partner. She was a liability. Later in the evening, when a group of investors approached, Vanessa clung to Marcus's arm like she belonged there, her smile dazzling. Elena watched from across the terrace, her throat tight, as Marcus introduced Vanessa by name. Charming, flattering, almost as though she were his wife instead. Elena's stomach turned as she realized he hadn't once bothered to introduce her that night. And Vanessa thrived in that spotlight. She leaned close, whispered jokes in Marcus's ear, touched his arm with calculated intimacy. Every gesture was a performance, one Elena couldn't ignore. Guests whispered, phones discreetly snapped photos, and still Marcus didn't care. Vanessa waited until Elena came closer, then delivered the cruelest blow yet. "You must be exhausted," Vanessa said with mock concern, her eyes dropping deliberately to Elena's pregnant belly. "Carrying all that weight around, while Marcus carries the weight of an empire." A ripple of laughter spread through the group. Elena's chest burned with humiliation, her eyes stinging. She wanted to turn and walk away, but Vanessa wasn't finished. "Honestly, Marcus," Vanessa continued with a sly smile, "she doesn't really fit this world anymore, does she?" Elena froze. The world? It was as if Vanessa was declaring in front of everyone that Elena was an outsider in her own marriage, her own home. Marcus's silence was louder than any defense. He didn't protest. He didn't correct Vanessa. He simply sipped his champagne, a smirk tugging at his lips. The message was clear. Vanessa was right. For Elena, the realization was devastating. She had given up everything, her career, her independence, her peace of mind, for this man. And now, in front of everyone, he allowed another woman to reduce her to nothing. But Marcus wasn't finished proving his cruelty. As the night wore on, he grew bolder. He laughed with Vanessa, touched her waist as though Elena didn't exist, and flaunted his disregard openly. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering about his audacity, others waiting to see how far he would go. And Marcus went further. When Elena finally mustered the courage to approach him, to gently remind him she was still there, still his wife, Marcus turned on her with a venom she had never seen in public before. "Stop hovering," he snapped, his voice sharp enough to draw attention. "Why can't you just stand there and look pretty, Elena? Do you have any idea how hard I work to keep this image, and you?" He stopped himself, but the damage was done. The words hung in the air like poison. Elena's face burned as the crowd murmured, as Vanessa's smile widened into triumph. For Marcus, it wasn't enough to ignore her. He had to belittle her, to strip her dignity piece by piece until nothing remained. And in that moment, Vanessa leaned closer, whispering just loud enough for Elena to hear. "Maybe one day he'll finally realize you were just a placeholder." The cruelty cut deeper than any knife. Elena felt her knees weaken, her grip tightening over her belly as though to shield her child from the venom surrounding her. But Marcus, drunk on pride and power, wasn't done yet. His voice dropped into a mocking tone, laced with disdain. "Maybe if you acted more like a wife and less like dead weight, we wouldn't be having this problem." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Even those accustomed to scandals were unsettled by the open cruelty. But Marcus didn't care. He never cared. He looked at Elena not with love, not even with anger, but with the cold detachment of a man who had already discarded her in his mind. "And Vanessa?" She smiled, as though victory was hers, as though Elena's pain was nothing more than entertainment. The night had reached its boiling point. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the heartless man Marcus truly was, and the mistress who encouraged his every cruelty. But what neither of them realized was that they had pushed Elena to her limit, and the moment that would destroy Marcus's carefully crafted empire was only seconds away. Because humiliation has a breaking point, and Elena's breaking point was about to arrive. The night had grown thicker, the party louder. The pool shimmered beneath strings of golden lights, and the air buzzed with the hum of laughter, music, and whispered gossip. Marcus Carter, glass of champagne in hand, was in his element, while Elena felt as though the ground beneath her feet was cracking. She had spent the entire evening enduring the ridicule, swallowing the sting of Vanessa's barbed remarks, and pretending not to hear the cruel whispers of strangers. But the breaking point came when Marcus paraded Vanessa through the crowd as though she were the queen of the night, leaving Elena to stand alone near the pool's edge. She couldn't take it anymore. Gathering her courage, Elena walked toward him. Her steps were careful, protective of the life growing inside her, but her heart pounded with determination. She would not let herself be erased. She would not let Vanessa take her place in front of the very world that once celebrated her as Marcus's wife. The moment she reached him, she laid a trembling hand on his arm. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm inside. "I am your wife. Don't forget that." The words hung in the air. Some nearby guests turned their heads, curiosity flashing in their eyes. Cameras rose discreetly, ready to capture the drama that was unfolding. Marcus's jaw tightened, his smile faltering. He hated being challenged, especially in public. He leaned close, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Not here, Elena. Not tonight." But she didn't back down. For the first time in months, she looked him in the eye, her hand firm against his arm. "Then when, Marcus? When will you remember who I am? When will you stop pretending I don't exist?" The murmurs grew louder. A circle of spectators formed, pretending to sip their drinks while watching intently. Vanessa's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, as though she had orchestrated the entire scene. Marcus's temper snapped. "You don't belong here," he hissed, his voice rising above the music. "You're a burden, Elena. Do you understand? You're dragging me down. Look at you, standing here pathetic, clinging to me while I try to build something greater. Why can't you just stay quiet and let me live?" Gasps erupted. Phones lifted higher. The image of Marcus Carter, the glamorous millionaire tearing down his pregnant wife in front of a crowd, was seared into every witness's mind. Elena's lips trembled. The humiliation cut deeper than any blade, but still she held his gaze. "I am your wife," she repeated, her voice breaking but strong enough to carry. Something dark flickered in Marcus's eyes, rage mixed with fear. The crowd, the cameras, the whispers closing in. He needed to assert control, to show everyone he was untouchable. And then, without warning, his hand shot out. He shoved her. The motion was swift, violent, and utterly shocking. Elena's body stumbled backward, her arms flailing as the world tilted around her. Her heart lurched, terror crashing through her as her swollen belly pulled her off balance. The crowd gasped in unison. A woman screamed. A phone clattered to the ground as someone fumbled to catch the scene. Elena's foot slipped against the wet tile of the pool's edge. She felt her body tipping, the shimmering water rising toward her, the sound of the party fading into a dull roar. For a split second, all she could think was, "My baby." Time slowed. She saw Marcus's face twisted in anger, Vanessa's lips curved into a cruel smirk, the blur of horrified expressions from strangers who did nothing but watch. And then, arms wrapped around her. Strong, steady, unshakable. She was yanked back from the edge of disaster, pulled against a chest she hadn't leaned on in years. Her body trembled as air rushed back into her lungs. Elena blinked through tears, her vision clearing, and saw him, Jack Lawson, her brother. The lifeguard no one expected. The man who had once tucked her into bed after their father's late-night shifts, who had written her letters from war zones, who had promised her he would always protect her, even from oceans away. Now, here he was, holding her as though she were still his little sister, shielding her from the man who had just tried to destroy her. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Phones captured every angle, flashes of light searing the scene into permanence. The story was no longer just whispered gossip, it was evidence, recorded, undeniable. Marcus's face paled. He hadn't expected anyone to intervene, least of all Jack. He took a step forward, trying to mask his panic with arrogance. "She tripped," he barked. "Everyone saw it, it wasn't me." But no one believed him. Not with cameras rolling, not with dozens of witnesses frozen in disbelief. Jack set Elena gently on her feet, his arms still firm around her shoulders. His eyes locked onto Marcus's with the cold, unwavering gaze of a soldier who had stared down enemies more dangerous than him. "You shoved a pregnant woman," Jack said, his voice low but carrying like thunder. "You shoved my sister." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Even the music seemed to falter, the DJ unsure whether to keep playing. Marcus tried to laugh, but the sound was hollow, brittle. "You don't understand. She was in the way. She's always in the way." The words only made it worse. Gasps turned into mutters, mutters into judgment. His empire of charm was crumbling before his eyes. Elena clung to Jack, her tears streaming freely now, not from weakness but from the shock of realizing she had nearly lost everything, her dignity, her baby, her life. But she wasn't alone anymore. Jack's grip tightened as he stepped forward, placing himself between Elena and Marcus. His presence was unshakable, his authority undeniable. He wasn't just her brother tonight. He was her protector, her shield, the one man Marcus could never intimidate. The crowd watched, breathless. Investors, socialites, strangers, all witnessing the fall of Marcus Carter in real time. And in that moment, Elena realized something that made her heart pound with new strength. The man who had spent years belittling her, ignoring her, and finally shoving her, had just destroyed his own empire. Not with a failed deal, but with a single act of cruelty. And the night was far from over, because Jack wasn't done, and neither was Elena. The party had dissolved into chaos after the shove. What was once a glamorous poolside soiree had turned into a scandalous spectacle. Guests whispered in tight circles, phones buzzed as videos were uploaded in real time, and the Carter name, once synonymous with success, was now plastered across screens in shame. But for Elena, none of that mattered. She wasn't thinking about investors or gossip or Marcus's unraveling empire. She was thinking about the trembling inside her body, the pounding of her heart, and the life growing within her. Her brother Jack had guided her away from the terrace, shielding her from the eyes and the cameras, into one of the mansion's private rooms. It was quieter here, but the silence did nothing to calm the storm in her chest. She sat on the edge of a velvet couch, clutching her belly with both hands, trying to breathe through the panic that clawed at her lungs. "Elena," Jack said gently, crouching in front of her. His hands, once trained to steady rifles and rescue comrades, now rested lightly on her knees. "You're safe. I've got you. Nothing will happen to you or the baby. Not while I'm here." But Elena shook her head, her tears spilling freely. "Safe? Jack, he shoved me. My own husband shoved me like I was nothing. What if I'd fallen? What if the baby?" Her words broke into a sob. Jack's jaw clenched, his eyes dark with fury. "He's not a husband. Not anymore. He's a coward." But the comfort did little to ease her despair. Elena wasn't just shaken, she was shattered. She buried her face in her hands, memories crashing into her. The nights she had defended Marcus to friends who whispered about his affairs. The mornings she had forced a smile, even when she knew he was lying. The countless times she had told herself things would get better, that if she just stayed quiet, if she just endured, love would return. But it hadn't. And now the whole world had seen the truth. "I've lost everything," she whispered. Jack frowned. "No, you still have yourself. You still have me. You have your child?" But Elena couldn't see it. All she could see was the ruins of a dream she had built with trembling hands. "The world saw him push me, Jack. Do you know what they'll say? That I'm weak, that I let this happen, that I'm the wife who couldn't hold on to her husband." Her voice cracked, rising into hysteria. "I'm a failure as a wife, a failure as a mother before I've even begun." Jack's hands gripped hers firmly. "Don't you dare say that. You are not a failure. He failed you. He humiliated you. He betrayed you. That's on him, not you." But Elena was spiraling. The shame, the fear, the humiliation, it was all too much. Her breaths came in shallow gasps, her chest tight as though the walls were closing in. She could hear the faint thrum of music from the terrace, the echo of laughter that no longer sounded human but monstrous, mocking. She rose unsteadily to her feet, pacing the room like a caged animal. "How am I supposed to raise this baby? How am I supposed to survive without him? I gave up everything for Marcus, Jack. My job, my independence, my voice. And now what do I have? Nothing. Just nothing." Her sobs filled the room, raw and broken. Jack stood, wrapping his arms around her as she shook in his embrace. "You still have fight in you," he murmured. "I see it. You may feel broken, but I know my sister. You don't stay down forever." But Elena couldn't believe him. Not yet. Hours passed. The party ended in whispers and scandal, with Marcus and Vanessa slipping away to avoid the flashing cameras. But the damage was already done. By morning, the video would be viral. By morning, Marcus's empire would tremble. Yet Elena didn't care about revenge or empires. Not now. When the last guest had gone, Elena sat by the nursery upstairs, staring at the half-finished crib Marcus had ordered, but never once touched. The room smelled faintly of paint and new wood, but to her it smelled like broken promises. She pressed a hand to her stomach, whispering softly to her unborn child. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry. I should have left him sooner. I should have protected you from this." The baby shifted gently inside her, as though answering. It only made her cry harder. Jack entered quietly, leaning against the doorframe. "You didn't deserve any of this," he said softly. "But maybe it happened for a reason. Maybe tonight was the night you stop hiding, Lena." Elena looked up at him, her eyes swollen, her voice hoarse. "I don't know how to be strong anymore." Jack walked over, kneeling beside her again. His eyes were steady, his voice certain. "You don't have to know how. You just have to decide you will. And when you do, I'll be right here to back you up." But Elena only shook her head, her doubt consuming her. She had been silenced for so long, diminished until she no longer recognized herself. How could she suddenly rise from the ashes when she barely had the strength to stand? The night dragged on, heavy with despair. For the first time since she married Marcus, Elena admitted to herself that love was gone, that her marriage was ashes. But knowing that truth didn't heal her. It hollowed her out. When dawn's light finally spilled across the horizon, Elena was still awake, her eyes fixed on the ceiling, her heart heavy with fear. She felt like a ghost in her own home, trapped in a life she no longer wanted but didn't know how to escape. She whispered again, to herself, to her baby, to the silence around her. "Maybe Jack is wrong. Maybe I really am broken." Her tears slipped into her hair as she closed her eyes. But downstairs Jack was making phone calls, his voice low and clipped, his tone the same one he had used on military operations. He wasn't waiting for Elena to believe in herself again. He was preparing something that would change everything. And Elena had no idea what was coming next. Morning light poured through the wide glass windows of the Carter mansion, but to Elena it felt cold and merciless. She sat at the edge of her bed, her hands folded protectively over her stomach, her eyes hollow from a night without sleep. The humiliation of the poolside incident replayed endlessly in her mind. The shove, the gasps, the flashes of cameras, the way Marcus's face had twisted with rage as though she were the enemy instead of his wife. She thought she was finished, broken, too weak to fight. But Jack Lawson had other plans. Her brother entered the room quietly, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He set one on the nightstand and handed the other to her. His presence, calm but firm, was the only thing holding her together. "Drink," he said gently. "You'll need your strength." Elena took a sip, though her stomach churned. "Strength for what, Jack? To keep hiding, to face another day where everyone calls me pathetic?" Her voice cracked. "You saw it. I couldn't even defend myself. I'm nothing." Jack sat across from her, his eyes steady. "No, you're not nothing, and you're not done. You just don't know what cards you're holding yet." She frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Jack leaned forward, lowering his voice. "While I was deployed, I kept track of Marcus, not because I cared about him, but because I knew someday his greed would put you in danger. And I was right. The shove wasn't the first line he crossed, it's just the first one the world saw." Elena blinked. "What do you mean?" Jack pulled a slim folder from inside his jacket and placed it on the bed between them. Her heart skipped as she stared at it. "Marcus has been laundering money through shell companies. He's been bribing inspectors, cutting corners on construction, and siphoning investor funds into private accounts offshore. I have proof. Emails, bank transfers, recordings." Elena's breath caught. How do you even have this?" "I have contacts," Jack said simply. "People who owed me favors, men I served with, investigators who trust me more than they'll ever trust him. I've been watching him, Lena, waiting. And last night, he gave us the perfect trigger. Now the whole world is watching him, questioning him, which means we have the upper hand." Elena shook her head, stunned. "You're saying Marcus could lose everything?" Jack's expression hardened. "I'm saying Marcus will lose everything. If you want him exposed, I can make that happen." The words hit her like a tidal wave. For months she had been drowning in helplessness, believing Marcus held all the power. But now, sitting in front of her was proof that his empire was built on lies, and that she had the ability to bring it crashing down. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Even if you have this, what good is it? He's powerful, Jack. He has lawyers, connections, people who protect him. Jack shook his head. Not anymore. Not after what he did last night. Investors will run the second they think their money isn't safe. Politicians will distance themselves. And the press, they'll eat this alive. Marcus doesn't realize it yet, but he's standing on quicksand. Elena's pulse quickened. For the first time in months, she felt a spark, small but undeniable, of hope. But with it came fear. If I do this, if I stand against him, he'll come after me. He'll try to destroy me. Jack's voice was steady, unyielding. Then let him try. You're not alone this time. You have me, and you have something he can't fight. Truth. Tears filled Elena's eyes, but they weren't tears of despair this time. They were tears of something new, something stronger. She whispered, almost to herself, I don't have to stay silent anymore. Jack nodded. No, you don't. But you need to make a choice. You can take this file and burn it, keep living in his shadow, waiting for the next time he decides to shove you down. Or, his eyes locked on hers, you can use it. You can rise. You can show the world who he really is. Elena's hands trembled as she reached for the folder. Her fingers brushed the edge of the papers, her heart racing. Every instinct in her screamed to run, to hide, to keep pretending. But beneath the fear, another voice whispered, one she hadn't heard in years, the voice of the girl she used to be, the girl who believed in family, in love, in her own worth. She opened the folder. Pages of damning evidence stared back at her. Emails with Marcus's signature, wire transfers with his name, documents stamped with his company logo. It was undeniable. Her tears fell onto the pages, not from sorrow this time, but from the weight of possibility. Jack's hand rested on her shoulder. You're stronger than you think, Lena. I can fight him in the shadows, but the real blow, the one that finishes him, it has to come from you. The world needs to see the wife he tried to silence standing tall. Elena wiped her tears, her chest rising with a shaky breath. Then I'll do it. I'll fight. Jack's lips curved into a rare smile. That's my sister. For the first time, Elena straightened her shoulders. She wasn't just the humiliated wife anymore. She wasn't just the pregnant woman shoved at a party. She was Elena Carter, and she was about to take back everything Marcus had stolen from her. But Jack wasn't finished. There's one more thing you need to know. Elena looked at him, her heart pounding. What is it? Jack hesitated, then said, Marcus's investors aren't just businessmen. Some of them are dangerous. If they find out he's been cheating them, they won't just ruin him financially. They'll destroy him. And if you stand in his way, they'll come for you too. Elena's breath hitched. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Jack leaned closer, his voice grave. If you go down this road, there's no turning back. You'll be making enemies you can't even see. Elena swallowed hard, gripping the folder tighter. Fear coursed through her veins, but beneath it burned a fire she hadn't felt in years. I've already lost everything once, she said quietly. I'm not afraid to lose what's left. Not if it means protecting my child. Not if it means ending him. Jack studied her, then nodded slowly. Then it settled. Marcus Carter is going down. The weight of her decision pressed heavily on her shoulders, but for the first time in so long, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. Elena Carter was no longer just a victim. She was a storm waiting to break, and the world had no idea what was coming. The morning after the Poolside scandal, Marcus Carter woke to a nightmare he couldn't control. Headlines screamed across every platform. Millionaire shoves pregnant wife at Poolside Party. Marcus Carter's empire crumbles amid viral video. Vanessa steal, Mistress at the scene. Clips of the shove replayed endlessly on news channels, slowed down frame by frame. Commentators debated whether his career was over, while social media burned with outrage. Sponsors pulled out, investors demanded answers, and his phone rang without pause. For the first time in his carefully crafted life, Marcus wasn't admired. He was hated. But Marcus wasn't a man who surrendered easily. He stormed into his office, his voice booming as he barked orders. This will blow over. We'll spin it. We'll say she tripped. Vanessa, get the PR team. I'll sue anyone who tries to ruin me. Vanessa, pale and shaken, tried to hide her own fear. The cameras had caught her smirk that night. She wasn't just a mistress anymore, she was complicit. And unlike Marcus, she had no empire to shield her. What Marcus didn't know was that Elena was no longer cowering in silence. While he scrambled to protect his image, Elena was preparing for war. With Jack by her side, she met quietly with a team of investigators and attorneys. The folder Jack had given her became her weapon. The evidence of Marcus's corruption was undeniable: money laundering, fraud, bribery, enough to topple his empire and land him behind bars. But Elena didn't want revenge in the shadows. Not anymore. She wanted the world to see her, strong, unbroken, and unwilling to let Marcus dictate her life 1 second longer. So she transformed. Gone was the soft blue maternity dress, the timid smiles, the woman who stood in the background. In her place was Elena Carter, radiant and commanding. She wore a tailored white gown that draped elegantly over her belly. Her hair swept back to reveal the sharp lines of her face, her eyes no longer filled with tears but fire. Jack stood at her side, a silent guardian, but it was clear. This was Elena's fight now. The press conference was held at a downtown hotel ballroom. Reporters flooded the room, cameras flashing as Elena stepped to the podium. The room hushed, the world waiting. She placed her hands firmly on the stand, her voice steady and clear. Last night, millions of you saw a man shove his pregnant wife. That man was my husband, Marcus Carter. For years I believed silence was love. I thought endurance was loyalty. I was wrong. Silence is surrender. Endurance is enabling. And love, real love, does not shove you down when you're already on your knees. Gasps filled the room. Flashes popped like lightning. Elena didn't falter. I stayed quiet because I thought I was protecting my family. But the truth is, silence only protected him. Today I end that silence. Today I stand not as his wife, not as his victim, but as a woman who refuses to be erased. Jack stepped forward, handing the file of evidence to a state investigator waiting in the front row. Elena lifted her chin, her voice slicing through the silence. My husband built his empire on lies, on stolen money, bribed officials, and broken promises. Here's the proof. I am turning it over to authorities today so justice can finally begin. The room erupted. Reporters shouted questions, cameras zoomed in on the damning documents, and within minutes, the story spread like wildfire. Marcus watched the live broadcast from his office, his face drained of color. His roar of rage shook the walls, but rage couldn't erase the truth. His empire was collapsing, and the woman he had tried to destroy was the one swinging the hammer. For Elena, it was more than revenge. It was rebirth. That night, as the city buzzed with the scandal, Elena sat with Jack on the hotel balcony. The weight on her chest was lighter than it had been in years. She touched her stomach, whispering softly to her baby, "You'll know strength, little one. You'll know dignity. And you'll never grow up thinking silence is love." Jack leaned on the railing, watching her with pride. "You did it, Lena. You didn't just survive, you won." She smiled through her tears, the first genuine smile in months. "I thought I was broken, but maybe I was just waiting to become who I was meant to be." Down below, protesters gathered outside Marcus's office building, holding signs, chanting his name with venom. Investors filed lawsuits, the government froze his accounts, and Vanessa vanished into obscurity. The empire he had sacrificed his soul to build was crumbling faster than he could patch the cracks. And Elena? She wasn't hiding anymore. She had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, her power. Days later, she walked into a charity gala, not on Marcus's arm, but on her own, with Jack at her side. The whispers were different this time. No longer pitying, no longer cruel. They were awed, respectful, inspired. She's the one who stood up to him. She's the reason he's finished. She's stronger than all of them. Elena didn't need to respond. She simply walked with her head high, her hand resting on her belly, the glow of resilience surrounding her. For the first time, she wasn't just a shadow in Marcus's world. She was the light of her own. And as the cameras flashed, capturing her transformation, Elena knew this truth. Marcus Carter had shoved her once, but she had risen higher than he could ever reach. Because women like her, women who endure, who suffer, who break and then rebuild, are unshakable. And no amount of money, power, or cruelty could ever silence her again. This was not her ending. It was her beginning. So that's how the story comes to an end, my dear friends. Are you still here with me right now? If you are, it must mean something in Elena's journey touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. And I want you to know, that's not just her story. It could be yours too. Elena's life teaches us something powerful. Even in the darkest, most humiliating moments, there is a spark inside of us that cannot be destroyed. She thought she was broken. She thought she had lost everything. And yet, in that very breaking, she found her strength. She rose. The Stoic philosopher spoke of this thousands of years ago. Seneca once said, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." How many times have we convinced ourselves we're too weak, too defeated, when in truth we were just one decision away from reclaiming our power? And Marcus Aurelius reminded us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That's exactly what Elena discovered. Silence is not love, endurance is not loyalty, and true strength is not about never falling. It's about rising every time we do. And maybe, just maybe, if you're still listening right now, you needed that reminder for your own life. That no matter who tried to shove you down, no matter how many times you felt unseen or unloved, you are still here. You still have the power to rise. So if this story spoke to you, I invite you to do 3 simple things. Hit the like button, share this video with someone who might need it, and subscribe to the channel so you can walk with us through more stories of resilience, healing, and transformation. Because remember, this isn't just Elena's story. It's a reminder for all of us. You are stronger than you think, and your beginning might be waiting right here, right now.